The night is drooping, and the neon lights in Xinghai City are like colorful snakes, winding between the high-rise buildings, illuminating the surface of the city and not illuminating the shadows below. Lin Zi'ang stood at the corner of the street, pushing the black-framed glasses on the bridge of his nose, and his eyes swept across the crowds of people along the road. He held a cup of black coffee he had just bought from a convenience store, and the heat was still surging on the mouth of the cup, but his attention was not at all on the bitter taste. He was waiting for someone, or he was waiting for an anomalous that he had been told directly. This city has not been peaceful recently. In the news, 2 missed reports were reported in 3 days. Most of the victims were ordinary people, and they disappeared without a trace, as if they were swallowed by the night. What's even more strange is that when some people are found, the memory in their brains seems to have been poached a piece, and even they can't remember who they are. The explanation given by the police is always investigation, but Lin Zi'ang knew that the water here was very deep. Although he was just an ordinary office worker, the thought of the truth in his brain always made him unable to help dig something that he shouldn't have to dig. Tonight, he stood on this hot business street, not for a walk or a pastime. A few days ago, he had a message in an anonymous forum on the internet saying that someone had watched a defunny woman nearby, holding a paper in her hand, muttering something, and then disappeared into the alley. This sounds like urban legend, but Lin Zi'ang's direct thoughts tell him that this may have something to do with those missed cases. He had a vague sensitivity to memory, or perhaps because he had a piece of his own brain, and for some days in the past, he was always as blurred as a part. As time passed, there were fewer pedestrians on the street, and the lights of Xiaoqing began to flow out. Lin Zi'ang leaned against the light column and was about to take another sip of coffee. The screen of the phone suddenly lit up. It was a text message from a strange number, the entrance of the alley, now. He raised his eyebrows and looked around. He didn't find any suspicious figures, but his heart was inexplicably tightened. He put the coffee cup into the trash can next to him and walked towards the entrance of the alley. The light in the alley was dim, only a few old road lights were barely lit, and there was a damp and musty smell in the air. Lin Zi'ang walked a few steps, and his footsteps reverberated in the narrow space, which was particularly clear. He stopped, his ears capturing the silence around him, and then heard a slight sound like someone was sobbing in a low voice. He turned a tide in the direction of the sound and finally saw the figure. A woman curled up in the corner of the wall deep in the alley, with her long hair loose, covering most of her face, and was wearing a thin white shirt, which looked a little wolf-shaped. She was holding a navy piece of paper tightly in her hands, and she was chanting something in her mouth, but the sound was too low and Lin Zi'ang couldn't hear it clearly. He hesitated for a moment, coughed lightly, and tried to attract her attention. The woman raised her head suddenly, her eyes filled with shock, like a shocked little animal. She subconsciously shrank back, and the paper in her hand was tighter. Lin Zi'ang raised his hands and signaled that he was not malicious. His voice was very light. "Hey, don't be afraid, I'm not a bad person. Do you need help?" The woman's eyes stayed on his face for a few seconds, as if to judge whether he was trustworthy. After a while, she said in a low voice, I don't know where I am, nor who I am." Her voice was trembling, as if she had just woken up from a nightmare. Lin Zi'ang moved in his heart, squatted down to keep a flattery with her, trying to make his language more gentle. "It's okay, just say it slowly. What's your name? Or, what do you remember?" The woman slammed her head, and the confusion in her eyes became deeper. "I only remember that when I woke up, there was this piece of paper in my hand. Something was written on it, but I couldn't understand it." She hesitated for a moment and passed the paper in her hand, as if she had made up some decision. Lin Zi'ang took the paper and took a look at it with the faint light of the road light. He found that there were numbers and letters written on it, like some kind of password. He bent his eyebrows and his brain quickly turned around. This kind of thing is not written casually at first glance, it may be a certain threat or a warning. He raised his head and looked at the woman and asked, "Did you have something else when you wake up? For example, a mobile phone, or something that can prove your identity?" The woman slammed her head, her voice so low that she could hardly hear. "There is nothing. I just know that I have to leave here and I always think someone is looking for me. Lin Zi'ang pointed a little and didn't ask anymore. He knew that now was not the time to force her to recall. The woman's state was obviously very fragile, and asking her strongly would only make her even more scared. He stood up and reached out to her. "That's it, follow me first, it's not safe here. My name is Lin Zi'ang, I live far away. You can go to my place to rest first, so let's think of a way." The woman looked at his hand, hesitated for a few seconds, and finally got a little bit, held his hand lightly and stood up. Her hands were very cold, as if they had just been pulled out of the ice water. Lin Zi'ang didn't say anything, but just silently took her out of the alley and walked towards the small apartment he rented. After returning to the apartment, Lin Zi'ang poured the woman a glass of hot water, then sat opposite the sand and began to look at her carefully. Her face was pale and her eyes were still filled with uneasiness, but it was better than when she was in the alley just now. She lowered her head and drank a sip of water, and said in a low voice, "Thank you. My name is Zhang Xiaoqing, I just remembered it." Zhang Xiaoqing, Lin Zi'ang repeated the name and pointed it at the head. "Good name. Do you still remember something else? For example, where's your home, or someone you know?" Xiaoqing slammed her head and her eyes dimmed again. "No, there is something wrong in her brain, as if something was poached." When she said here, a trembling sound came to her voice. "I always think that someone deliberately made me forget something." Lin Zi'ang heard this and his heart skipped a beat. He remembered the victims of the missed case, the state of their condition when they were found, missing memory and empty eyes, as if they were moved by their hands. He didn't say these thoughts, but just patted Xiaoqing on the shoulder. "Don't think too much, take a break first. I'll help you figure it out." Xiaoqing was a little bit clear, and he didn't say anything anymore. He sat on the sand with his cup in his arms, staring at the floor empty. Lin Zi'ang stood up, walked to the desk, took out the paper, and began to carefully study the contents. The arrangement of numbers and letters is inconsistent, at least with his current knowledge, what it means. He took out his cell phone, took a photo, then opened the computer and prepared to check some information. At this moment, a sudden loud knock sound came from the door. Lin Zi raised his eyebrows and said, "Who would come to find him at this time?" He looked at Xiaoqing, signaled her not to make a sound, then walked to the door with his hands and glanced out through the cat's eyes. There was a tall man standing outside the door, wearing casual clothes, but the aura on his body was obviously a trainee. Lin Zi'ang was nervous and guessed the other party's identity. He opened the door and put on an impatient look. "It's midnight, who?" The man looked at him coldly, took out a certificate and shook it in front of him. "Chen Dawei, from the criminal police." "Lin Zi'ang, right? I want to talk to you about some things." Lin Zi'ang's heart sank, but he didn't show up on his face, but just said, "Police officer, what's wrong with me in the middle of the night? I'm not illegal." Chen Dawei ignored his jokes, looked over his shoulder, glanced at the room, and then said in a low voice, "Don't put it on, I know you're investigating those missing cases. Someone saw you wandering around the commercial street tonight, and brought a woman back. Tell me, who is she?" Lin Zi'ang was shocked, and he didn't expect that he would be targeted. He knew that Chen Dawei was not easy to fool, but now it is not the time to hand over Xiaoqing. He smiled and said with a relaxed voice, "Police officer, you've misunderstood. That's my friend. I'm drunk too much, so I'll take her back for a rest. What about miscarriage? I'm just an ordinary person, so how can I check it?" Chen Dawei narrowed his eyes, obviously not believing his words, but he didn't ask anymore, but just snorted coldly, "It's better. Lin Zi'ang, I warn you not to worry about anything, otherwise I won't know how I die at that time." After speaking, he turned away, and walked away in the corridor. Lin Zi'ang closed the door, leaning against the door panel, and long breathed. Xiaoqing stood up from the sofa and asked in a low voice, "Did he come to find me?" "Maybe." Lin Zi'ang rubbed his eyebrows and turned quickly in his brain, "but he has no evidence now and will not be easy to move. Don't worry first, I will think about it tomorrow." It was a little clear, but I didn't say anything, but the anxiety in my eyes became even more intense. Lin Zi'ang returned to the desk and continued to study the paper. He felt a sense of premonition in his heart. This thing was much more complicated than he thought. The next morning, Lin Zi'ang took Xiaoqing to a nearby restaurant for breakfast. They ordered 2 simple fried egg toast, sat by the window, and ate with a low head. Occasionally, they looked up at him, as if they wanted to say something but didn't dare to open their mouths. Lin Zi'ang saw it and asked actively, "What's wrong?" Xiaoqing hesitated for a moment and said in a low voice, "I had a dream last night and saw some strange pictures. It was like a place in the experiment room. Someone walked towards me with a stylus. When I woke up, my heart beat very fast, and I always thought it was not a simple dream." Lin Zi'ang heard this and put the fork in his hand on it. A word flashed in his brain: memory manipulation. In recent years, Xinghai City has been saying that a mysterious organization is doing this kind of practical experience, specializing in the memory of people and doing things that cannot be seen. He always thought that this was just urban saying, but now it seems that Xiaoqing's situation seems to be related to this. He didn't tell these guesses, but just pointed it out and said calmly, "Maybe the pressure is too high, don't think too much. When I finish my meal, I'll take you to a place, or maybe I can find some traces." Xiaoqing didn't ask anymore, just silently pointed. After breakfast, Lin Zi'ang took her to a broken net, where he usually contacted some special friends. He found a computer familiar with it, logged into an encrypted chat software, and then sent a message, "Xiaoman, if you have an event, please come back quickly." A few minutes later, the other party replied with a smiley face, and then said, "See you in an old place, half an hour." Lin Zi'ang turned off his computer and turned his head to Xiaoqing, "Let's go and take you to see someone. She may know something useful." Half an hour later, they came to an inconspicuous small bar, where smoke was foggy, and several young people were playing cards in the corner, and the air was filled with the smell of alcohol and smoke. Lin Zi'ang walked to the bar with Xiaoqing. A short-haired girl was leaning against her cell phone. After seeing him, she grinned and said, "Yi, Zi'ang, did you bring a beautiful woman today? Wouldn't you introduce it?" "Xiaoman, don't be polite." Lin Zi'ang rolled his eyes and pulled Xiaoqing to his side. "This is Xiaoqing, I'm a little confused. I have a paper in my hand and wrote some passwords on it. You can see if it can be unwrapped." Xiaoman raised her eyebrows, took the paper and glanced at it, then whistled. "This thing is not simple, it looks like some kind of encryption algorithm. I have to spend some time studying it, but..." She turned around, and there was a hint of cunning in her eyes. "You have to tell me first, where is this paper? Also, what is the relationship between this Miss Xiaoqing and those recent misunderstandings?" Lin Zi'ang's heart sank, knowing that although Xiaoman was not right, his brain turned faster than anyone else. He didn't answer directly, but just smiled. "Don't ask so many questions, help me unlock my password, it's easy to say." Xiaoman curled his lips and didn't ask any more questions. He just put the paper in his pocket and blinked at Xiaoqing. "Don't worry, miss, there is nothing I can't solve with me. Wait for my news." After leaving the bar, Xiaoqing couldn't help asking, "Who is she? She looks not very good." Lin Zi'ang smiled and said lightly, "She is Zhou Xiaoman, who specializes in selling information. Although she is not dependent on her words, she is very capable. In a place like Xinghai City, if you want to dig some secrets, you have to know a few people like her." Xiaoqing was a little bit clear, and she didn't say anything, but there was still a sense of anxiety in her eyes. Lin Zi'ang saw it in his eyes, and was calculating the next plan in his mind. He knew that this paper was just the beginning, and Xiaoqing's misunderstanding, those misunderstandings, and even Qindao's warnings might all point to the same truth behind it. And this truth is definitely not something he can touch easily. But he didn't have to choose. The memory of his memory made him unable to stop. He looked at Xiaoqing beside him and made up his mind silently. No matter how dangerous it was, he would help her find the past and figure out what kind of secrets this city is hidden. The sunlight in the afternoon came through the gaps in the broken leaves outside the bar and landed on several empty wine glasses on the bar, reflecting fine light. Lin Zi'ang and Xiaoqing just left Zhou Xiaoman's, and the air still smelled of smoke and alcohol in the bar. They were walking on a not-so-hot street in Xinghai City. There were old shops on both sides. Occasionally, several pedestrians rushed over, and no one looked at them more. Xiaoqing lowered her head, her fingers clenched the corners of her clothes unconsciously, and it was obvious that she was still digesting the conversation with Xiaoman just now. Lin Zi'ang glanced at her and spoke as if nothing had happened. Don't think too much. Although Xiaoman doesn't talk about it, he still depends on his work. If you hand it over to her by hand, there should be news soon. Xiaoqing glanced a little and said in a low voice, I always think that everything is too untrue. Why is it me? Why did I forget so much? There was a hint of confusion in her eyes, as if she was asking Lin Zi'ang, and as if she was asking herself. Lin Zi'ang didn't answer directly, but pushed the black-framed eyeglass on the bridge of his nose, calmingly speaking, some things that I forgot may be a kind of protection. Once we figure out all this, you may understand why this is the case. When he said this, some vague fragments of the brain were flashing in his brain, memory fragments that he could not grasp no matter how he was. He slammed his head, threw away these thoughts, and turned to Xiaoqing. Let's go back to my place first. You will still be alone in the past few days, safety first. When they returned to the small apartment rented by Lin Zi'ang, it was already dark. The nights in Xinghai City are always very fast. The neon lights on the high floors are lit up, as if reminding the people of this city that the things hidden in the darkness are more than just beautiful scenery. Lin Zi'ang opened the door and let Xiaoqing go in first. He stood at the door and looked at both sides of the corridor in a habitual way, confirming that no one followed him, and then closed the door. He has investigated many miscellaneous things in the past few years and has long since become such a cautious habit. The house is still the same, and it is almost shabby. There is a piece of sofa, a book table, and there are several old books about psychology in the corner. Xiaoqing sat on the sand, holding her knees, her eyes a little empty. Lin Zi'ang said nothing, walked to the kitchen and boiled water, poured her a cup of hot tea, then sat at the desk, opened the computer, and began to search for some information. He still had a photo of the paper on his hand. Although the original had been handed over to Xiaoman, he always felt that he could see something from it. The light on the screen reflected on his face, looking a little cold and hard. He knocked on the keyboard, glanced at Xiaoqing for a while, and saw that she was still absent-minded. He couldn't help asking, "What did you remember again? If you have any questions, it's not good for you." Xiaoqing was pulled back to her senses by his voice, and hesitated for a moment, and said in a low voice, "I was just on the road when I suddenly remembered a picture. I was not very clear, but it seemed to be a large room with many screens and some people in white. They were discussing something. I couldn't hear it clearly, but I remember I was very scared and I especially wanted to escape." Her voice became smaller and smaller, and her fingers clenched the teacup unconsciously. Lin Zi'ang heard this and his eyebrows rose slightly. He stopped the action in his hand and turned to look at her, with a little more serious expression in his language. "Are you sure that it's memory, not a dream? Are there any other details, such as the room, or those people's faces?" Xiaoqing slammed her head, and there was a helpless look in her eyes. "I don't know, it's really blurry, like a mist. I can only make sure that the feeling of fear was particularly real." Lin Zi'ang pointed a little and didn't ask any more. He knew that it would be difficult for me to fully recover by remembering such things, especially those that were passed over the foot. He turned around and continued to search for some keywords on his computer: Xinghai City, missing cases, and memory experience. A bunch of chaotic information popped up on the screen, mostly urban discourses and controversies that were not dependent on mystery, but he still looked at the past patiently and tried to find some useful traces from it. At this moment, the phone suddenly vibrated, and a new message popped up on the screen, which was posted by Zhou Xiaoman. "There is progress, it's 9 o'clock in the evening, and I'll see it in the old place." Lin Zi'ang took a look at the time. It's now 7:30, and there's still some time. He turned off his computer, stood up and said to Xiaoqing, "Xiaoman has news, I have to see her. You stay here, lock the door, don't open it to strangers." Xiaoqing was a little bit light, but there was a little uneasy in his eyes. "Do you have no problem going there for someone? I always feel worried. Lin Zi'ang smiled and said with a relaxed voice, "Don't worry, it's not the first time I've done this. Xinghai City looks strange on the surface, but in fact, it's safe as long as you don't step on the bottom line of some people. Please wait for me to come back and call me if you have something to do." After saying that, he grabbed his coat, put on his hat, pushed the door and walked out. The Xinghai City under the night is even more noisy, and the lights on the high-rise building are like a huge net, covering the entire city. When Lin Zi'ang came to the old small bar again, the atmosphere inside was still the same, with smoke fogging, and several young people were playing loudly in the corner, and there were several drunk men sitting next to the bar. Zhou Xiaoman leaned against the bar, holding a glass of chicken in her hand. After seeing Lin Zi'ang, she slapped at him and smiled a little cunningly. "Come on, it's coming very quickly. Why didn't you bring that little beauty with you?" Lin Zi'ang rolled his eyes, sat next to her, and said in a low voice, "Don't waste, have the things on the paper been unpacked? What did you find?" Xiaoman didn't rush to answer, but took out a folded paper from his pocket and pushed it in front of him. "Look at it for yourself. The password here is not simple, it is a mixed encryption, and the numbers and letters correspond to a set of coordinates, and a time. It took me a long time to crack it, isn't it?" Lin Zi'ang took the paper and opened it. There was a string of numbers and letters written on it. Next to it was Xiaoman's handwritten explanation. The coordinates point to a scrapping garden in the eastern district of Xinghai City, and the time was 2 o'clock in the morning 3 days later. His eyebrows flashed and his brain quickly turned. The industrial park in the east has long been deserted. I heard that there were several strange misunderstandings a few years ago, but it was later blocked by the police, and ordinary people could not enter. At this time and place, there is a strange feeling. He looked up at Xiaoman, and his words were low. "Are you sure this is what is on the paper? Are you doing it wrong?" Xiaoman sniffed his shoulders, drank a bit of wine, and spoke in disdain. "You are not at ease when I do it. The algorithm of this password is complicated and most people can't solve it at all. I also checked the industrial park and found that there were rumors that there were often strange lights in that place at night, and some people suspected that some underground organizations were causing trouble. Miss Xiaoqing, you probably cannot get involved in this matter." Lin Zi'ang didn't say anything, but just silently put away the paper, and his heart felt like a stone was pressing down. He knew that these remarks that Xiaoman said were probably more than just groundless. The missed cases in Xinghai City over the past few years are probably related to memory manipulation, and the paper in Xiaoqing's hand is obviously a key cable. He glanced at Xiaoman and asked in a low voice, "Is there any other information? For example, who might be doing everything behind the scenes?" Xiaoman grinned, with a meaningful light flashing in his eyes. "If you want to know more, you have to increase the price. I am a business person who talks about rules, and the information is not for nothing. However, for the sake of our old friendship, I can give you a reminder first. Be careful, there are big people staring at you recently. Your police officer friend, Chen Daowei, is not a fuel-saving light." Lin Zi'ang's heart sank. On the surface, he didn't show it. He just pointed. "Okay, the price is good. When I confirm this thread, I will calculate the money for you." After saying that, he stood up and walked out of the bar. The night wind was a little cool. Lin Zi'ang wrapped his coat tightly. His brain was full of what Xiaoman said just now. The coordinates, time, the abandoned industrial park, and the name of Chen Daowei, these things are stringed together, like a corner of a piece of puppet, pointing to a larger benevolence. He knew that he had stepped into a dangerous territory, but his pace could not stop. The thoughts of the truth and the desire for memory made him unable to turn back. When I returned to the apartment, it was almost 11 o'clock. Xiaoqing was still sitting on the sand and saw him enter the door. Lima stood up, with a tight slight lingering in her language. "What's the case? Is there any news?" Lin Zi'ang clicked his head, hanged his coat around the door, sat opposite her, and said in a low voice, "The password on the paper was unopened," pointing to a place, the scrapping garden in the east, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning 3 days later. "I plan to go and see you. I'll go with you." Xiaoqing stopped him before he could finish speaking, with a little more determined look in her eyes. This matter has something to do with me, I can't always hide behind me. If I don't figure it out, I will never get out of this mist. Lin Zi'ang looked at her and was silent for a few seconds. Finally, he still pointed, okay, but you have to listen to my arrangements. That place is not simple, and it may be dangerous if you go there. In the next 3 days, Lin Zi'ang began to prepare. He collected all the information about the East District Industrial Park online and found that there was indeed a lot of strange news in that place, and even eyewitnesses said that people wearing uniforms came in and out, like members of a certain organization. He also contacted an old friend and borrowed some equipment, flashlights, self-defense sticks, and even a small camera to prevent everything from being recorded. 3 days passed in a flash. On the night of the appointment, the night sky of Xinghai City was covered by heavy clouds, and the moonlight could not be seen. Lin Zi'ang and Xiaoqing were wearing dark clothes and hats, making themselves look inconspicuous as much as possible. They took a sprint car and got off a few kilometers away from the industrial park, and the rest of the journey was walking. The nights in the east are particularly deserted, with almost no people on both sides of the street, only a few cherry-ups of road lights lit up alone, casting long shadows. Lin Zi'ang walked in front, holding a flashlight in his hand, and turned around from time to time to confirm that Xiaoqing could keep up. Her face was a little pale, but the look in her eyes must have not changed. He said in a low voice, "You'll be there after walking a little further. Remember, don't talk, don't be disturbed, listen to me." Xiaoqing clicked a little, but didn't say anything, just followed him silently. After about 20 minutes of leaving, they finally came to the outside of the industrial park. This place had long been surrounded by iron networks, and there was a sign of no entry hanging at the entrance, and the surrounding area was filled with grass, and there was a wasteland. Lin Zi'ang found a hole on the iron net and signaled Xiaoqing to follow him to Diamond. The park is even more lush, and the empty factory is like a sleeping giant beast, occasionally blowing over, making a deep cry. According to the coordinates provided by Xiaoman, Lin Zi'ang brought Xiaoqing to the oldest-looking factory. The door is locked, but the lock is filled with iron lenses, which obviously hasn't been used for a long time. He took out a small tool from his backpack, pried the lock open in 3 or 2 seconds, and pushed the door and walked in. The factory was pitch black and there was a smell of mold in the air. Lin Zi'ang opened the flashlight and swept around. He found that some scrapped mechanical parts were scattered on the ground, and several broken paper boxes were piled up in the corners of the wall. He was about to walk in again when he suddenly heard Xiaoqing and screamed in a low voice, "Wait, there is light." Lin Zi'ang looked in the direction she pointed, and indeed, there was a faint blue light deep in the factory. He felt a tight heart in his heart and said in a low voice, "Follow me and don't make any noise." The two approached carefully, and their pace was deliberately pressed down very low. As the distance narrowed, the blue light became more and more obvious, like the light emitted by some kind of electronic equipment. When he got closer, Lin Zi'ang finally saw the source of the light source clearly, an old computer with a bunch of data and charts displayed on the screen, and there were several wires next to it, leading to something that looked like a medical device. His heartbeat couldn't help but speed up, and a word flashed through his brain: memory manipulation. This thing looked so similar to the picture in Xiaoqing's dream. At this moment, Xiaoqing suddenly grabbed his arm, and the sound was trembling. I remember that I have come here. Those screens and those equipment, I have seen them." Her eyes were full of shock, as if she was touched by something. Lin Zi'ang was about to calm her down, but suddenly he heard a sound of walking outside the factory, calm and powerful, as if someone was walking towards her. He quickly turned off the flashlight, pulled Xiaoqing and hid behind a pile of scrapped parts, and said in a low voice, "Don't make a sound, someone is coming." The sound of the steps is getting closer and closer, accompanied by the deep conversation. "Although I can't hear the specific content clearly, my language is bright and cold." Lin Zi'ang held his breath and flew around his brain, trying to figure out what to do next. He knew that this place was definitely not simple, and they had almost stepped into a dangerous trap. Lin Zi'ang squatted behind the scrapped parts, feeling his heartbeat almost covering the footsteps of his ears. He held Xiaoqing's hand tightly and signaled her to remain calm. The sound outside the factory was getting closer and closer, and the sound of his foot stopped at the door, and then there was a low conversation, like two men discussing something. Lin Zi'ang couldn't hear the specific content clearly, but there was a sense of coldness and hardness in his language, which made people's spine flutter. His brain flew quickly, trying to determine who the person who came and how to remove him. Xiaoqing's breathing was a little rapid, and her hands were shaking slightly in Lin Zi'ang's palm. Obviously she was so stressed by the sudden tightness of the atmosphere. Lin Zi'ang pinched her hand lightly and said in a low voice in her ear, "Don't panic, let's see what's going on first." His voice was very low, almost like a breath, but there was a calm meaning in his language. Xiaoqing lighted down a little, bit her lips tightly, and tried to calm herself down. When the iron door of the factory was pushed open, a harsh squeak sound came out, and he replied in the empty space. Lin Zi'ang glanced through the gaps in the parts pile and saw two men in black uniforms walking in. They are tall and seem to have something on their waists. They may be talkative machines or more dangerous things. One of them held a flashlight and the light column swept in the factory, while the other looked down at the tablet in his hand and muttered in his mouth, "The data display is nearby, so it shouldn't be far away." Lin Zi'ang's heart sank, realizing that they might be looking for the old computer, or looking for Xiaoqing. He glanced at the girl beside him and saw her face pale, her eyes full of fear, as if she was stabbed by some memory fragment. He didn't have time to think too much, and quickly calculated the way to take off his body and his brain. There is a hole at the back of the factory, which should be able to reach the outside, but it is too static and easy to be discovered. The main door obviously doesn't work. The only way now is to delay time and wait until the other party leaves the video before acting. The two men's stomps were getting closer and closer, and the flashlight beam was almost swept to where they were hiding. Lin Zi'ang held his breath and suddenly had an idea flashed in his brain. He took out a small stone from his pocket and threw it lightly at the other side of the factory. When the stone landed, a crisp splash sounded, which was particularly obvious in the quiet space. The two men immediately stopped and one said in a low voice, "Did you hear it?" "There is a silence on it." The other point was a little, and the two turned around and walked towards the sound, and the light column of the flashlight also moved away. Lin Zi'ang seized the opportunity and said to Xiaoqing in a low voice, "Go, now." He pulled her out from behind the pile of parts, and moved the cat with his waist towards the hole behind the factory. Xiaoqing's pace was a little stumbled, but she still gritted her teeth and kept up. The two of them tried not to make any sounds. The hole is far away, and the outside is the backyard of the industrial park, which is full of grass, which just can provide cover. Just as they were about to go out, a roar suddenly came from the factory. "Who is there? Stop!" Lin Zi'ang felt nervous and knew that the other party had discovered their silence. He didn't turn around, and pulled Xiaoqing to quickly drill out the hole, then said in a low voice, "Run, don't stop." The two of them stumbled into the grass, the light column of the flashlight behind them swayed, and the sound of footsteps and anger were chasing them. Lin Zi's brain has only one thought: he must get rid of these people, otherwise he won't want to escape tonight. The grass slashed on the face and felt a little stinging. Xiaoqing's breathing became heavier and heavier, and obviously her physical strength was not keeping up. Lin Zi'ang glanced at her and said in a low voice, "Hold on for a while, there is a waste warehouse in front of you, let's hide in." Xiaoqing pointed a little, bit her teeth and followed him. The two ran for a few hundred meters, and finally arrived at a broken warehouse. The door was already incredible and opened with a light push. After they dripped in, they immediately closed the door and hid in a corner full of old wooden boxes, not daring to breathe. The steps outside were moving away, as if those people were chasing in another direction. Lin Zi'ang leaned against the wooden box, and Chang Wang spat out, turned his head to look at Xiaoqing, and asked in a low voice, "Are you okay? Are you injured?" Xiaoqing shook her head, her face still pale, but her eyes were determined. "I'm fine. I was just in the factory, and I remembered something again." I seem to have seen those people. The clothes they were wearing were the same as those in my dreams. Lin Zi raised his eyebrows and quickly strung these lines in his brain. Xiaoqing's memory fragments, the equipment of the abandoned factory, and the people who pursued them all pointed to a possibility, seeing movie. This name has been mentioned in the underground circle of Xinghai City in recent years. In the rumors, they are a group that specializes in studying memory control, using high-tech means to capture and modify people's memories and do things that cannot be seen. Lin Zi'ang always thought that this was just urban saying, but now it seems that Xiaoqing's misfortune is probably the result of their experience. He didn't lift all these guesses, but just said lightly, "The more you remember, the more beneficial it will be for us. But now is not the time to recall, we have to leave this ghost place first." He took out his phone from his backpack and found that the signal was weak, but he still reluctantly sent a text message to Chen Daowei, "If there is a situation in the East District Industrial Park, come quickly." Although he doesn't trust this police officer, the only one who can help them get rid of them is the police. After posting the news, Lin Zi'ang leaned against the wooden box and began to calculate the next plan in his brain. He knew that tonight's incident was just the beginning. Since the movie could find out their actions, it showed that the other party had already set his sights on Xiaoqing, and he might even be under the supervision. If you want to reveal the truth, you have to take the initiative to attack, but this also means greater risks. He looked at Xiaoqing and saw that she was gasping for a low head. Her long hair was scattered on her shoulders, looking a little wolf-like, but there was no beginning confusion in her eyes. "What do you think?" Lin Zi'ang suddenly asked, with a small piece of trial in his language. "Do you still want to continue to investigate what happened tonight? If you don't want to, I can send you to a safe place, and I will come by myself." Xiaoqing looked at him, silent for a few seconds, then slammed her head. "No, I want to continue. I know this is dangerous, but I can't hide forever. If I don't figure out my past, I will never get out of this shadow." Although her voice was low, there was a stubbornness in her language. Lin Zi'ang pointed a little, and didn't answer her anymore, just said, "Okay, then we'll face it together. But you have to remember that no matter what happens, listen to my arrangement." Xiaoqing nodded, and the two of them smiled at each other, as if they had reached a certain tacit understanding. At this moment, a sudden burst of stomping sound came from outside the warehouse, accompanied by the light of the car lights swept across the broken door. Lin Zi'ang felt nervous, thinking that it was someone who was obsessed with the film, but then he heard a familiar voice growling, "Lin Zi'ang, are you mother here? Don't hide, let me roll." It was Chen Daowei. Lin Zi'ang relaxed his voice, stood up and pushed the door open. Sure enough, he saw Chen Daowei standing outside with several plainclothes policemen, and the car lights made the entrance of the warehouse bright. When Chen Daowei saw him, his face turned blue and he slashed his head. "Do you kid have a brain sick? Are you running to such a place in the middle of the night to seek death? How many times have I told you, don't fold in these things?" Lin Zi's voice was heard and his lingering words were relaxed. "Police officer, don't be angry. Didn't I send you a rope? There is something weird in the factory there, you can tell if you go and take a look." He pointed to the depths of the industrial park, and there was a zipper in his lingering words. Chen Daowei snorted coldly, not paying attention to him anymore, but turned to the person beside him, "Go and check, don't miss anything." Then he looked at Xiaoqing behind Lin Zi'ang, and a complicated look flashed in his eyes. "Who is she? Don't tell me that you are the ghost of your friend being drunk too much." Lin Zi'ang smiled and did not directly answer. "She is the key proof. You can check the specifics yourself. But I remind you that the water in the east is very deep. If you police drag it on, you may not be able to save your own people." There was a warning in his words. Chen Daowei heard it and his face became even harder, but he didn't chase him anymore. He just snatched his hands and let them go on the car. When the car opened back to the city, it was already dawn. Xiaoqing leaned against the back seat, looking out the window with empty eyes, as if she hadn't come from last night's surprise. Lin Zi'ang sat next to her and said in a low voice, "Don't worry. Although Chen Daowei's mouth is hard, he is still reliable. At least now, we are safe." Xiaoqing glanced at him a little, turned her head and looked at him with a low voice. "Thank you. If it weren't for you, I might not know what to do." There was a hint of gratitude in her eyes, but more of her confusion about the future. Lin Zi'ang didn't say anything, but just patted her on the shoulder, counting on what to do next in his brain. Chen Daowei took his team to search the industrial park and should be able to find some traces, but the organization of the Immortal movie will never easily expose everything. He knew that the game had just begun and the real challenge was still at the forefront. A few days later, Chen Daowei indeed brought back some news. They discovered the old computer in the factory, and there were some test records, which proved the existence of memory control technology. But more information was destroyed in advance, and the identity of the envoy behind the scenes was still tragic. Chen Daowei said coldly on the phone, "Lin Zi'ang, you're leaving this time, but don't think that this is over. The above have begun to focus on you, so it's best to be honest next." Lin Zi'ang heard the warning on the phone and smiled, not taking it to heart. He shut down the phone, turned to Xiaoqing, who was sitting on the sofa, and said in a low voice, "The police found something, but it was not enough. There may be more traces in your memory that have not been dug out. We have to continue." Xiaoqing was a little bit clear, and there was a little more determination in her eyes. "Okay, I'm ready. No matter what is ahead, I won't shrink." Although her voice was light, there was a sense of determination in her language. At this moment, a sound of knocking on the door suddenly came from the door. Lin Zi raised his eyebrows and walked to the door and looked through the cat's eyes. He found that it was Zhou Xiaoman. She stood outside the door, still with that sly smile on her face, holding a U-plate in her hand, and shook it at him. "Yi, Zi'ang, have you been very exciting recently? Do I feel interested in this big gift?" Lin Zi'ang opened the door and raised his eyebrows. "What? Don't tell me that it's half true and half false information." Xiaoman grinned, stuffed the U-plate into his hand, and said in a low voice, "Look at it for yourself. There are some internal information from the movie society. I paid the boss's robe to get it. But I remind you that this is the best time to burn after watching it. Don't let anyone know that I gave you." Lin Zi'ang took the U-plate and felt aroused in his heart. On the surface, he didn't show it. He just pointed, "Okay, the price is good. Is there anything else?" Xiaoman snatched his shoulders, turned around and left, and said, "Be careful, the pool of water in Xinghai City is not as simple as you think." After closing the door, Lin Zi'ang returned to the desk and inserted his U-disk into the computer. A bunch of encrypted files quickly popped up on the screen. He spent some time to unfold and found that there were indeed some records about the movie theater, including the list of experiments, the operation process, and even a few high-level names. One of the names shocked his heart, Zhang Xiaoqing. He turned to look at Xiaoqing, seeing her lowered her head and drank water, as if she hadn't noticed his strangeness. He didn't rush to say anything, but just silently shut down the documents and flew around his brain. Xiaoqing's name appears on the list, indicating that her misunderstanding is definitely not an accident, but part of the experiment. But what made him even more uneasy was that the document also mentioned a proxy shadow plan, which seemed to be the core project of the memories, and Xiaoqing is likely to be the key to this plan. The night once again covered Xinghai City, and the neon lights on the high floor were still flashing, as if mocking everyone in this city. Lin Zi'ang leaned against the window and pushed the black-framed glass on the bridge of his nose. His eyes swept over the night view outside the window, and his brain was full of information he had just seen. He knew that what he had to do was far more dangerous than he thought. But he had no choice, and his thoughts on memory and his desire for truth made him unable to stop. Xiaoqing stood up from the sofa, walked to him, and asked in a low voice, "What's wrong? It seems that I have something to worry about." Lin Zi'ang smiled and said lightly, "It's nothing, I'm just thinking about where we should dig up the thread next. You can rest, I'll still have to be busy tomorrow." Xiaoqing clicked a little, didn't ask any more, but just returned to the sofa silently, with a sense of anxiety in her eyes. The night wind outside the window was a little cool. Lin Zi'ang closed the window, turned back to the desk, opened the computer again, and began to study the documents. He knew that the game was far away before it ended, and they were already deeply trapped in it and had no way to retreat.